On a planet far from Earth, the aliens lived in peace. Their cities were grand, shining with advanced technology. The air was clean, and their world had been prosperous for centuries. The people, with their long lifespans and brilliant minds, believed that nothing could ever harm them. They had no enemies. Their technology was unmatched, their cities indestructible. In their eyes, they were the rulers of the galaxy. The aliens lived in harmony, focusing on expanding their knowledge and perfecting their society. Their cities were filled with towering spires and roads made of shimmering, polished materials. The streets bustled with the sound of advanced vehicles moving silently above the ground. At night, the skies glowed with 1,000 stars, all part of their galaxy, all under their control. They never worried about threats because they had never faced one. The galaxy seemed to revolve around them, and they took comfort in this belief. High above the planet, the leaders of the aliens met in their most secure chamber, a vast room filled with holographic maps of the galaxy. They discussed their plans for the future. New technologies were being developed, and their scientists were working on ways to harness more energy, control more planets, and ensure their dominance. No one in the room questioned their safety. After all, who could challenge them? Their space stations were untouchable, their ships the fastest and most powerful. The thought of a threat was simply laughable. But on the edge of the galaxy, something was stirring deep in the dark void of space. Far from the comfort of the alien homeworld, a small group of ships moved silently. They were different from anything the aliens had seen before, huge, powerful, and dangerous. They had survived on harsh, dangerous planets, where every day was a fight for survival. They had been forged by the fiercest environments the galaxy had to offer. These warriors had lived through natural disasters, brutal predators, and endless wars. The universe had thrown everything at them, and they had adapted, evolved, and survived. The Deathworlders were not like the peaceful, complacent aliens. They had no interest in peace, no love for technology that had made the aliens so proud. They had only one goal: to make their mark on the galaxy. Their ships were enormous, filled with hardened warriors, each one battle-tested and ready for anything. Their weapons were unlike anything the aliens had ever imagined, designed, not for elegance, but for total destruction. The Deathworlders had only one rule: survival. And to survive, they had to dominate. They had learned the hard way that mercy had no place in the galaxy. As their ships silently cut through space, their target was clear: the alien homeworld. The Deathworlders knew that the aliens had never faced anything like them. The peaceful civilization had no idea what was coming. As the ships neared the alien planet, a sense of unease began to stir within the alien leaders. A small signal had been detected, something they couldn't explain. At first they thought it was a glitch, a minor interference in their communication system, but as the days passed, the signal became stronger, more defined. It wasn't a natural occurrence, and it wasn't just a malfunction. Something was out there. Still, the alien leaders dismissed the warning. They had faced nothing but peace for so long. The idea of an enemy was foreign to them. They brushed off the growing unease as nothing more than paranoia. They laughed among themselves, confident that their technology, their cities, and their strength would protect them from anything. But as they sat in their high chambers, discussing their next project, they had no idea that their world was about to change forever. The Deathworlders were almost there, and nothing would ever be the same again. The calm before the storm was almost over. The first sign of trouble came quietly, like a whisper in the dark. The alien world, so accustomed to peace and certainty, suddenly felt a strange vibration in the air, a subtle disturbance, nothing more than a shift in the atmosphere. But for the first time in centuries, there was a sense of tension, a feeling that something was wrong. At first, no one took it seriously. The scientists noted it down, but they assured the leaders that it was just a minor anomaly, nothing to be concerned about. But the feeling lingered, gnawing at the edges of the calm like a persistent shadow. Days passed, and the disturbance grew. The planet's most advanced sensors began to pick up strange signals from deep space, coming from the farthest reaches of the galaxy. These signals were unlike any the aliens had ever encountered. They weren't random space noise or celestial events. They were deliberate, purposeful. But the aliens, confident in their superiority, remained indifferent. "It's nothing," they reassured each other. "Just a passing comet or a malfunction in our systems." But then, one morning, the sky itself seemed different. The sun rose in a strange, unsettling way, casting an orange glow across the city streets. The air felt thick, heavy, as though the entire planet was holding its breath. And then, from the deepest parts of space, the first attack came, a sudden burst of energy from nowhere, shaking the very ground beneath them. It wasn't an explosion, not yet. It was a pulse, a wave of power that reverberated through their systems, knocking out communications and power grids. The alien cities flickered, and for a brief moment, everything went dark. Panic spread across the streets. The alien leaders were forced to take notice. For the first time in their long history, they didn't have an answer. They scrambled, ordering their finest technicians to track the source of the energy burst. But there was nothing on their scanners, nothing they could pinpoint. The source of the attack was too far to reach, too hidden. It was as if the enemy knew exactly how to strike without revealing themselves. As the days passed, more disturbances followed. Ships vanished from the skies, entire cities went offline, and mysterious, unexplainable events began to occur. The once immovable alien defense systems began to fail, one by one. No one understood how. The situation was spiraling out of control, and the alien leaders were desperate for answers. But the truth was, they were facing something they had never prepared for, something far more dangerous than anything they had ever imagined. On the surface of their world, the people went about their lives, unaware of the disaster unfolding around them. Their cities remained pristine, their lives untouched by the growing chaos. But deep below the surface, a storm was gathering. The Deathworlders, hidden in the far corners of space, had already made their mark. Their ships were silent and deadly, gliding toward the alien homeworld like predators on the hunt. And then, one evening, it happened. The skies split open as massive ships emerged from the darkness of space, their silhouettes against the stars like the shadow of death itself. These ships were unlike any the aliens had ever seen, ancient, battle-worn and terrifying. The Deathworlders had arrived. The aliens, frozen in shock, realized too late that the peaceful life they had known was over. The battle for survival had begun, and the Deathworlders would not stop until they had claimed their place in the galaxy. As the first blast of energy ripped through the air, the aliens finally understood. They had no idea who had come, but they were about to learn. The storm had arrived. The sky above the alien cities darkened as the sound of distant rumbling echoed across the land. What was once a peaceful, untroubled world now trembled beneath the weight of the unknown. The first wave of the Deathworlders' attack had hit, and it was unlike anything the aliens had ever faced. Their defenses, so carefully constructed and perfected over centuries, were useless against the invaders. It wasn't just their weapons that made the Deathworlders so terrifying, it was their sheer presence. They were an unstoppable force, moving with precision and brutal efficiency, with no hesitation or mercy. On the surface, the alien cities were thrown into chaos. Sirens blared, and the streets that were once filled with the hum of advanced technology now erupted into confusion and fear. The people who had never known war, who had never experienced real danger, were now scrambling for safety. The aliens had never imagined that their utopian world could be so easily shattered. As the Deathworlders descended, their ships unleashed a barrage of energy, obliterating entire blocks and leaving nothing but ruins in their wake. It was a scene of utter devastation, a nightmare that had become all too real. The alien leaders, still in their high chambers, watched in disbelief as their planet was torn apart. They could see the destruction on their holographic screens, entire cities crumbling under the weight of the Deathworlders' power. What was happening? Who were these invaders? They had no answers, only confusion and growing terror. The Deathworlders didn't speak in words. They didn't need to. Their actions said everything. They didn't want to negotiate. They didn't want peace. They came for one thing only, to show the aliens their place in the galaxy. And the aliens, for the first time in their existence, understood that they were not the rulers of the stars. They were just another species in the galaxy, vulnerable and weak. The Deathworlders, as they moved through the cities, were like shadows. They were relentless, their movements swift and coordinated. They didn't need to stop for rest or supplies. They were machines of war, built for survival. Their armor was scarred, battered from countless battles, but it only made them more terrifying. Each soldier moved with purpose, using their surroundings to their advantage, blending into the chaos and striking with deadly accuracy. The alien defenses crumbled as they faced an enemy who knew nothing of mercy, only of domination. As the Deathworlders pressed forward, the aliens tried to fight back. They launched everything. They had missiles, energy beams, and even the powerful shields they had once believed were indestructible. But the Deathworlders didn't flinch. Their technology was older, simpler, and yet far more effective. Their weapons tore through the alien shields like paper, and the soldiers moved through the wreckage with ease, never slowing down. It was clear that the aliens had no chance. Their civilization, once the shining beacon of the galaxy, was collapsing. In the chaos of the invasion, One alien commander stood on the front lines, determined to stop the Deathworlders. His heart raced as he watched his forces get slaughtered around him. He could see the end was near, but even in the face of certain defeat, he couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. These warriors, these Deathworlders, they were different. There was no fear in their eyes, no hesitation. They had no intention of leaving until their mission was complete. And as the last of the alien defenses fell, the commander realized that the Deathworlders were not just conquerors, they were a force of nature. They had come to show the galaxy that there were always those who were stronger, those who had survived the worst, and those who would never kneel. The aliens, for the first time, understood they had underestimated their enemies, and now they were paying the price. The Deathworlders had made themselves known, and nothing would ever be the same again. The alien leaders, now trapped in their own crumbling command center, struggled to maintain control. Their once unshakable confidence had turned to panic. Communication systems had gone dark, and their vast network of satellites and drones, once the eyes of the galaxy, had been taken down in mere moments by the Deathworlders' advanced technology. The sky outside the windows was filled with the terrifying sight of enormous, battle-scarred ships hovering above the ruins of their cities. The alien soldiers, once the pride of their military forces, were scattered and disorganized. They couldn't fight what they didn't understand. The Deathworlders were like ghosts, slipping through their defenses and striking where they least expected. The alien commander, a proud and battle-hardened leader, stood at the heart of the chaos. His eyes, once filled with certainty, were now clouded with doubt and fear. His armies, his technology, everything they had built was crumbling around him. The Deathworlders had come, and they were not just warriors, they were predators, relentless and unstoppable. With every passing moment, the commander felt the weight of his people's inevitable defeat. Desperation set in as the aliens tried one last futile attempt to repel the invaders. They gathered their remaining forces for a final stand, lining up their weapons and deploying their most advanced fighters. It was their last chance to hold back the wave of destruction. But even as they prepared for battle, the Deathworlders did not engage with any rush or hesitation. They simply moved forward, their ships and soldiers cutting through the alien resistance like a knife through paper. It was an unstoppable force meeting an immovable object, and the result was devastation. For the alien commander, the reality began to set in. The Deathworlders were not here for conquest, they were here to teach a lesson, to remind the galaxy of its place. The commander had once believed in the superiority of his people, in the righteousness of their peaceful existence. He had thought they could not be touched, that nothing could challenge them. But the Deathworlders had shattered that belief, showing him that survival was not about superiority or technology. It was about resilience, about adapting and overcoming every obstacle thrown your way. The aliens had never faced that kind of strength, and now they were paying the price for their ignorance. The air was thick with tension as the last of the alien forces fell back. The city they had built, a monument to their once unshakable power, was now a ruin. The Deathworlders had not just destroyed their cities, they had destroyed the very idea that the aliens were invincible. The commander, broken and battered, stood amidst the wreckage, his people defeated, and his once proud civilization on the brink of collapse. The Deathworlders, however, showed no signs of slowing. Their victory was not one of victory for victory's sake. They had come to prove a point, to show that no civilization, no matter how advanced, could ever survive without recognizing the strength of the galaxy's true survivors. They had come to teach the alien race a lesson that would echo across the stars. And as the last blast of energy tore through the alien command center, the commander realized that their time had run out. The Deathworlders had won not just the battle, but the war for survival. And nothing, not technology, not power, could ever take that away from them. The lesson had been delivered. The air was thick with the acrid smell of burning cities and the sharp scent of smoke that filled the once clear skies. In the hushed ruins of what used to be the alien capital, the survivors now gathered, their faces ashen with fear and disbelief. The once proud alien civilization lay in tatters, its people unsure of what the future would hold. There was no more confidence in their eyes, only the cold grip of reality. They had been humbled, shattered by a force they could never have imagined. The invaders, a group of survivors from harsh and unforgiving worlds, had wiped away everything the aliens had built, but they had also brought something far more dangerous, a truth that was too powerful to ignore. Among the survivors was the alien commander, a figure once revered for his leadership, now a broken symbol of defeat. Standing at the edge of the ruins, he looked out across the smoking remnants of his world. His once proud civilization had crumbled in the face of the Deathworlders' strength. What had begun as a moment of overwhelming destruction now seemed like the calm before something even worse. The Deathworlders had not come to conquer. They had come to teach, to show the galaxy its true place. The commander had learned the hard way that power and technology were not enough to protect a civilization. The Deathworlders had shown him the most brutal truth of all. No matter how advanced you are, no matter how strong your weapons, there is always something bigger, something more relentless. The galaxy was not a playground for the arrogant, and survival wasn't about building walls of steel or creating machines of war. It was about adaptability, resilience, and knowing when to fight and when to surrender. As the alien leaders convened, they were faced with the inevitable question, what now? The Deathworlders had made their presence known, and they weren't leaving. They had crushed the aliens' pride, and now it was time for the survivors to decide if they would learn or perish. The commander, standing before the shattered council, spoke not with defiance but with acceptance. His voice, once filled with command, now trembled with the weight of understanding. "We were blind," he said, his words heavy with regret. "We believed we were untouchable, that nothing could bring us down. But the Deathworlders have shown us our weakness, our arrogance. We thought our technology could protect us, that our peace could last forever. But we forgot that strength comes from more than just power. It comes from the ability to survive, to face the worst the galaxy can throw at you and still stand. We must learn from them." The room was silent, the weight of his words sinking in. There was no more bravado, no more talk of victory. The aliens had been forced to confront their own limitations. The Deathworlders had stripped away their illusions and had shown them the reality of existence in the galaxy. Survival was a constant battle, and peace was fragile, easily shattered by forces beyond their understanding. And then, the impossible happened. The Deathworlder leader, the one who had led the charge, appeared before them, walking through the ruins as if it was his own. His presence was as imposing as ever, but there was something different this time. He was not here to destroy, not here to conquer. He was here to offer them something no one had expected, a chance. "You have learned," the Deathworlder leader said, his voice calm yet powerful. "But learning is only the first step. Now, you must adapt. You must survive in a way that you never have before. This galaxy is full of dangers, and we are the ones who have learned how to face them. If you wish to survive, you must walk the same path we have walked." The commander, still recovering from the shock, nodded slowly. He understood now. The Deathworlders had not come to destroy them. They had come to force them to evolve, to make them confront the truth of their existence. The aliens had to change, or they would be erased by the next threat that came from the far reaches of the galaxy. The journey ahead was uncertain, but the path was clear. The aliens had been given a choice, to rebuild their shattered world and survive, or to let the Deathworlders' lesson be the last one they ever learned. There was no going back. The galaxy would no longer tolerate arrogance. Only those who learned, who adapted, would survive. And for the first time, the alien commander realized that the real battle was just beginning. The days that followed were filled with uncertainty, but also with a flicker of hope, something the aliens hadn't felt in generations. The Deathworlders had left them with no choice but to evolve, to rethink everything they knew about survival. The aliens' once perfect world, with its towering cities and impenetrable defenses, now lay in ruins. They had been brought to their knees by an enemy they couldn't even comprehend. But as the dust settled, something unexpected began to stir within the survivors. They had been humbled, yes, but they had also been given a chance to rebuild, to start anew. The alien commander, now working alongside the surviving leaders, could feel the weight of the task ahead. There was no easy way forward, no clear path to redemption. The Deathworlders had shown them that strength was not something you built in isolation. It was something you had to learn, to earn, to fight for. They had to unite not just against external threats, but against the arrogance that had led them to this point. The alien population, once divided into factions, began to come together. There was no room left for pride or personal ambition. The Deathworlders had forced them to face the truth. The galaxy didn't revolve around them. The idea of peace and tranquility was a fleeting illusion, and the reality of survival was something much harsher. But the aliens were resilient. They had survived for centuries because of their intellect, their technological prowess. Now, they had to use those same strengths to adapt, to rebuild their world into something stronger, something wiser. The first steps were the hardest. The Deathworlders, still watching from the shadows, remained distant, their presence looming over the rebuilding process. But this time, they didn't interfere. The aliens had been given a chance to prove themselves, and they knew it. They had to earn their place in the galaxy once more. They had to prove that they could survive, that they could adapt to the harsh lessons the Deathworlders had taught them. Slowly they began to change. Their leaders, once content to rule from behind massive walls of technology, now walked among the people. The once unthinkable idea of cooperation with other species began to take root. The aliens realized that the galaxy was filled with different kinds of strength. It wasn't just about firepower or technological superiority. It was about resilience, resourcefulness, and the ability to keep going, no matter the odds. The alien commander worked tirelessly, pushing his people to rethink everything they had once believed. They began to study the Deathworlders, learning from their ways. They realized that the Deathworlders' true strength wasn't just in their ability to fight, it was in their ability to survive, to adapt to environments that would have broken most other species. They lived in a state of constant vigilance, constantly evolving to meet the challenges of their brutal worlds. The aliens, for the first time, saw the value in this philosophy. They began to train themselves not just for war, but for survival. They built alliances, not just with other aliens, but with the unknown dangers lurking in the galaxy. Months passed, and the alien world, while still scarred, began to show signs of life again. The once bustling cities were being rebuilt, but this time, the designs were different. The structures were fortified, built with an eye toward defense and adaptability, not just beauty. The alien people, once complacent in their power, now worked together, united by the harsh lessons they had learned. They knew that the galaxy was not theirs to control. It was a dangerous place, filled with unpredictable threats, but now, they were ready. They had learned from the Deathworlders, and they had taken their first steps toward becoming something new. They were no longer the same species that had ruled the galaxy with an iron fist. They were survivors, willing to learn, willing to adapt, and willing to fight when necessary. The Deathworlders had come to teach them a lesson, and the aliens were beginning to understand it. The galaxy was not a playground for the weak. The future, though uncertain, was theirs to shape, and they would do so with the resilience and strength they had finally learned to embrace. The rebuilt alien cities stood as silent witnesses to the transformation that had taken place. The once proud towers, now reinforced with layers of hardened alloys and energy shields, cast long shadows over streets that had once been full of arrogance and pride. The air felt different now, filled with a quiet sense of purpose. The alien people moved through the streets with a new awareness, a newfound resilience that had been hard. The lessons of the Deathworlders still hung in the air like an unspoken truth, a constant reminder that survival was never guaranteed, and power could be fleeting. The alien commander, now older and wiser, walked through the streets with a sense of cautious optimism. His once bitter heart had softened, the weight of the past replaced by a determination to guide his people toward something stronger. He knew they weren't yet fully healed. There were still scars, both physical and emotional, but they had taken the first steps toward redemption. The Deathworlders had left a mark on them that would never fade, but it wasn't just a mark of defeat. It was a mark of change, a mark of survival. They had learned, and now they would thrive. Despite the progress, there was still tension in the air. The galaxy had not forgotten the aliens' arrogance, and many other species watched them closely. The Deathworlders were still out there, their presence a constant reminder of what could happen if complacency ever returned. The alien commander knew this. He knew that his people couldn't afford to slip back into the comfort of their old ways. The galaxy was a vast and unpredictable place, and they had to stay vigilant, constantly evolving to face whatever came next. The Deathworlders, however, had never truly left. They had watched from the shadows, observing the alien people as they struggled to rebuild. It wasn't that the Deathworlders wished to see them fail. They had come to offer the toughest of lessons, but they also respected the aliens' strength to adapt. And now, it seemed, the aliens were on the verge of truly understanding. They had proven they could survive, and in their survival they had earned something invaluable: respect. One day, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the city in a warm, golden glow, the commander received an unexpected visitor. The leader of the Deathworlders stood before him, a towering figure, still cloaked in the aura of danger and power. But this time, there was no aggression, no hostility in his eyes, only quiet respect. The commander had learned what the Deathworlders had wanted them to learn, and now it was time for a different kind of exchange. "You've done well," the Deathworlder leader said, his voice deep and steady, filled with a rare, almost imperceptible warmth. "Your people have adapted, you have survived, and for that, I commend you." The commander, humbled, nodded. "We are not the same as we once were. We have learned the value of resilience. We have learned to survive not by dominance, but by understanding." The Deathworlder's gaze softened slightly, and he stepped back. "You were once lost, but you have found your way. There are more threats out there in the galaxy, others who will come for your world, for your people. But now, you have a chance. You have the strength to face whatever may come. The commander stood silently, taking in the gravity of the words. He understood now. The Deathworlders hadn't just come to destroy, they had come to prepare. The galaxy was far too dangerous to live in without respect, without the ability to adapt to constant change. And in that understanding, the aliens had found a new purpose, not to dominate, but to coexist. As the Deathworlder turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows once again, the commander looked out at his people. They were no longer the same. They had been broken, but they had been rebuilt. And now they were ready for the future, a future where survival was earned, not expected, and where strength was measured, not by the weapons they held, but by the willingness to change. The Deathworlders had made themselves known, but it was the aliens who had shown they could learn, and in that they had found the key to their true strength. The galaxy was vast, filled with endless challenges, but the aliens no longer feared it. They were ready.